Good morning again, everyone. Folks are still hopping on, so I'll repeat the reminders for today. Everyone's currently muted right now so that we can minimize the noise. If you have any questions, please send your questions using the chat box directly to the person designated questions. We're already getting some questions coming in. The recording link will be distributed. The press conference is being streamed live on Facebook. If you're coming in as a representative from media, please add press to your name and your agency so we can identify you. We'll get started shortly. Okay, so magsisimula na po ang press conference natin today. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat at maraming salamat for joining us. This press conference has been convened by numerous community and civic organizations. We will feature speakers from Isang Bayan, USA, US Filipinos for Good Governance, Malaya Movement USA at Migrante USA. My name is Nikki De Leon from the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, and I will be your moderator for today. Today will be both in Tagalog and English, so if you have any questions, clarification questions, please utilize the chat box. I want to provide some context for our press con today. We're going to be hearing from over 5 speakers from across the US, sounding the alarm on overseas absentee voting and the mishandling that we are witnessing. Ang tanong natin ay, may makikinig ba sa sambayan ng Pilipino? After 1 week, marami ang wala pang balota at marami din ang nangangamba na mawawalan sila ng kanilang karapatan para bumoto. Prior to the start of the overseas absentee voting, Filipinos raised the alarm over the unpreparedness of the Commission on Elections, COMELEC, and the foreign missions to facilitate smooth voting process. With The overseas voting period having already begun, Filipinos are still without ballots, and the COMELEC is noting a lot of delays. This is despite the Republic Act number 9189's provision stating that the COMELEC should have transmitted ballots to embassies and consulates no later than 75 days before the day of elections. Sa ibang countries around the world, marami ding irregularities and fraud that have been noted and raised, such as the pre-shaded ballots in Singapore, and other voters receiving two ballots in different countries. In the US, several groups are demanding transparency and accountability. There are many open letters that have been sent, petitions that have been sent, and direct dialogue that have been coordinated with foreign missions, exercising their civic duty to ensure a clean and honest election. And we remain vigilant of any irregularities, especially in such a critical period in our history. With that, we're gonna introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Eric Lachica from the US for Filipinos for Good Governance. He's based in Washington, D.C. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for that, Nikki, for that great introduction overview. Yes, could you flash the letter we sent the Philippine ambassador and the consul general, if it's possible, Drew? I'd just like to highlight, we sent this letter right away on April 12, since a couple of volunteers and I went to the embassy to talk to the ambassador and the consul general about the opening of the machines. And we were there on the official date on April 10. And we sent that letter to bring to the attention the disturbing problems regarding the Filipino overseas absentee voting, known as OAV. And we brought to the attention is the last minute embassy press releases on April 8th. Regarding the conduct of the 22 national elections. And our concern was that it excluded poll watchers, news media, and local community observers with a unreasonable 24-hour application deadline. It was really crazy because apparently the COMELEC made a resolution on April 6th, but they wanted to end the application for outside community observers and the media on midnight, April 9. So we proposed a solution to the ambassador and to the consul general, but we haven't heard back from them on whether they got this to the attention of the COMELEC, that we wanted to amend that April 6 resolution to approve the extension. COMELEC delegates its authority to approve accreditation applicants to the heads of post, who shall be allowed to continue accepting application on or before May 9, 2022. This would meet the COMELEC legal requirements and the embassy's goal of a secure, accurate, free, and transparent elections. And hopefully it would win the trust of global Filipinos. In the previous elections, which I was an observer and a party list representative, it was very easy. Just show your, ID, driver's ID or license or a U.S. passport or Philippine passport, and you'll be allowed to sign in and watch the proceedings. All right. Number two, we raised the concern of the delay of the mailing of 35,000 and more absentee ballots by the embassy to the Filipino voters in several jurisdictions: D.C., Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Maryland, Tennessee, and Virginia. That's 35,000 plus. We were informed last Wednesday that by the embassy that the ballots would be mailed by Good Friday, April 15. Now, from what I gather, it's going to be a very logistical. I think because of their lack of response, they probably are still mailing it today. That's my suspicion. Number three, we recommended that the dealing with the questions about undelivered or returned election packets by the U.S. Postal Service because of bad addresses of Filipino voters who moved since the 2016 or 2019 elections. Can these voters move, retrieve their ballots in person, fill them out, and return them before the deadline of May 9? I received a separate email from the public information officer that they will be publishing, like in the previous election, a list of returned election packets for the voters who didn't receive it to come and pick it up before the deadline and return it to the embassy. We also recommended that the consul generals or their deputies in the United States hold weekly 1-hour town hall meetings like they were doing last Monday in New York, streamed on Facebook to update their concerned followers and news media persons and answer questions of the election's progress. Now, as mentioned before, places like Riyadh, Singapore, have following the 30-day voting period provided by the OAV law of 2013, which you mentioned earlier. And voting by mail is supposed to enhance the voting process abroad and should not result in denying, limiting, or restricting the ability of registered voters to vote within the less than 3 weeks. We seek transparency from the COMELEC and the Department of Foreign Affairs to ensure the Filipino voters are not disenfranchised. The OAV timelines and procedures should be published and disseminated with adequate notice to the public. So we forward this to the ambassador and the consul general for their positive response or prompt and positive response in facilitating urgent remedial action by the COMELEC. Maraming salamat to them for their public service, because that was the request that they recourse our complaint to the local consul general and the ambassador. So those are my talking points. I'll be glad to answer your questions later on.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Eric Lachica, for sharing that organizations have reached out to the ambassador to share the disturbing problems surrounding the voting process. This included in the sharing last-minute press releases with only 24-hour notice. And we are seeing that this impacts our community, potentially excluding community observers, media, poll watchers, and is resulting in disenfranchisement. Our next speaker will be Carolina De Leon from New York, representing Malaya Movement, New York. Carolina, the floor is yours.
Can anyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Carolina, and I'm a concerned Filipino voter. The is an Malaya Movement chapter. So I'll talk more recently what happened in New York. So the Philippine Consulate General of New York represent 39,048 Filipino voters from 11 different states across the Northeast. Excuse me, which includes Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Vermont. As the overseas absentee voting period began, and not a single voter in the New York jurisdiction had received their ballots, nor had the vote counting machine arrived and had been tested or sealed. During the first week of April, the Philippine Consulate announced the BCM testing and sealing date for April 7, but it was canceled and rescheduled for April 11, which was also canceled and finally happened on April 13. This raised alarm and a lot of concern from our kababayans because in previous years, the process were completed weeks before the start of the OAV period. In the months of and weeks leading up to the OAB, overseas absentee voting period, there had been limited information shared by the New York Consulate on the voting dates on the arrival and other election paraphernalia. Filipino voters began asking, nasaan ang balota? And were seeking clarification on the voting process. Excuse me. I just moved. So these are some questions that folks are asking, during conversation or town hall meeting with the congen or the commissioner on COMELEC. I just moved. Get my ballot. How do I cast my vote? How can I become a poll watcher? I'm unsure if I'm on the voter list. Community members used the channels available to them and began reaching out directly to the New York Consulate via email, tweeting, calling, asking in person, or posting on Facebook for answer and transparency to ensure these delays would not lead to voter disenfranchisement or voter suppression, but they were met with delayed response or even defensive and accusatory social media posts by the Consul General. Ultimately, the Consul General announced holding a town hall on the election on April 11th in response to the questions raised by the community. Given the rising issues concern Filipino voters and members of the Filipino-American community in the Northeast, started a petition addressed to the Commission on Election Office for Overseas Voting, the Philippine Consul General in New York, Mr. Elmer Cato, and Ambassador Romualdez to raise their concern and to issue the following demands. One, electronic and printed voting material should be disseminated now. We should not wait for the voting machine to come in from the Philippines. A help desk is created to assess voters who have questions about the voting process via walk-ins or phone or email. 3, timely and transparent information on the voting and vote counting process will be shared on various social media platforms, including through live streaming, to ensure that our ballots are received properly, handled, and counted by the consulate. 4, ensure voters' right to cast their ballot regardless of any address of delivery issues, including lost and damaged ballots and ballots rendered void by error. 5, information regarding the mechanics of tallying or canvassing votes to determine how many individuals can volunteer or poll watchers. These concerned Filipino voters also organized a rally in front of the Philippine Consulate April 11 to demand transparency and clean and honest election. Before the start of the rally, community members had delivered the petition and requested meeting with Elmer Cato to discuss the community's concern and demands. However, during the meeting, it was clear that Elmer Cato was not interested in listening to their concerns, to our concern, I would say rather, but instead continued to speak over community members and barely allowed them to get a word into to talk and about the issues. As of today, over 250 Filipino have signed the petition, which includes academics, students, lawyers, healthcare workers, domestic workers, artists, community activists, and more. We do want to acknowledge that the New York Consulate has finally received the shipment of the ballots and BZM as of April 11. In the past week, the facts and questions section to their website and has started sharing more frequent updates on the election process. We see this as a victory of the people for raising their concern and demanding their rights to exercise their democratic right to vote. With increasing transparency that started only after our kababayan in Northeast sounded the alarm to OAV mishandling and delays. We applaud the workers at the consulate for working tirelessly and open overtime beyond their usual work hours to prepare and mail out the ballots. However, we still raise the question, why was the OAB process so delayed and mishandled in New York? Jurisdiction this ample time to prepare for the election and a large COMELEC budget paid for the Filipino people. If the preparation was better prepared for, the workers at the Philippine consulate would have to be working overtime to ensure our ballots are received. We also raised the question with over 39,048 eligible voters in the Northeast, will voters still receive their ballots with enough time to mail them back by May 9th? What happens to those who don't receive their ballots or those who live in faraway states who are unable to travel to New York consulate? This is a crucial election period, and regardless of which political candidate you support, we must continue to engage in our to ensure an honest election and remain vigilant of any overseas absentee voting irregularities. Sit on, but if there is a question and answer later, I would also question and answer.
Maraming salamat, Miss Carolina from New York, sa sharing nyo sa experience dyan at for raising your voice and concerns and seeking dialogue with the consulate. In the sharing, sabi po nyo, hindi aktibo ang mga konsulado para maabot ang mga Pilipino sa kanilang jurisdiction at ang lahat ng registered voters para mabigyan sila ng malinaw na informasyon. At salamat din sa pag-share ng mga victories sa mga outreach nyo dyan sa New York. Our next speaker is Ms. Zenia Tupas from Migrante, Los Angeles. Ms. Zenia?
Thank you so much, Nikki, for that introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zenia from Migrante, Los Angeles. We got concerned about overseas absentee voting when, we didn't hear anything from the consulate. So we came up with, Migrante Los Angeles came up with an open letter to the Philippine consulate regarding our concerns, especially on the lack of information dissemination, the timely information we need, through their website and social media about the mechanics of voting and, the timeline of the voting process. So, and then we were concerned because they don't have a help desk, in person at the consulate. So, to answer queries about overseas voting. And that people were also asking, so in relation to the timeline, people were also asking about, when do they expect their ballots? And so we were able to witness, so we have been following up the website of the Consulate General. And so we were able to attend the final sealing and testing of the vote counting machines on April 7. However, so on April 7, during the time of the sealing and testing, we were able to raise these concerns to Consul General Badajos, Edgar Badajos, and And so they responded to us in terms of queries on overseas voting. They only have an email, which sometimes, doesn't reply on, on time. So the main issues that concerning overseas voting in the coverage area or the jurisdiction of the Consulate General of Los Angeles, which covers Southern California, Southern Nevada, and the state of Arizona, is the lack of voter outreach, transparency, and timely information on the voting process or the timeline of the election. So it's already April 18, and we haven't received our ballots yet. Personally, I haven't received mine. So there's confusion over dates when we receive our ballots. So during the dialogue, which happened during the final sealing and testing, we were told that they're going to mail the ballots April 8th. And until today, they are still processing, I don't know how you call it, like they're still doing the ballots, half of the ballots of the in the LA coverage area are still in the Philippine consulate. I just returned from the consulate because we were expecting to be, poll watching, because they're scheduled, the poll watch to be on Mondays and Thursdays. And what turned we were surprised that, there were still boxes and boxes of the ballots that have not been mailed. So we had a talk with the Consul General this morning, and of the total 34,917 voters in our area, so far they only mailed about 17,000 ballots, so it's only half. And so the concern is that they don't have a clear target in terms of how many ballots they're going to mail every day, although they say that they hope to finish or to send all the ballots by April 21. So that's like Friday this week. So and then in terms of disenfranchisement of voters, it's also a main concern because a lot of our kababayans who have become US citizens have not reacquired Filipino citizenship because of the difficulty in getting the appointments through their online appointment system. Because a lot of our kababayans who want to apply to reacquire their Filipino citizenship are mostly seniors, so they have a hard time navigating the internet. And actually I was there in the consulate like a month ago, and there were kababayan senior citizens who came all the way from out of state just to apply for dual citizenship, and they couldn't do it because they were not aware that they should they should get an appointment. So those kababayans who have not reacquired Filipino, who didn't have dual citizenship, were not able to register and vote. And then there's also in the issue of disenfranchisement of voters. We have, as Eric has mentioned earlier, those with bad addresses and no forwarding addresses. Thus, the ballots were returned to the consulate. So as of today, Consul General said that there were like 7 ballot packets that were returned to the consulate, and they promised to post the names of those registered voters whose ballots returned to the consulate, to put it on Facebook or on their website. And then another thing about the disenfranchisement of voters that we're concerned is the handling of the mail, because we don't have control over the handling of USPS over the mail. So they would have, so, you know, the damaged ballots, the vote counting machines are really very sensitive if the ballots are crumpled or, you know, like there's creases in the edges. So we just hope that the vote counting machines can, you know, will not spit it out. So that's one issue that would that's really concerning us, because you know, the handling of the ballots from the consulate to the voter, and when the ballots return from the voter to the consulate. So that's an issue. And then we should also take note that the like do voter information among our constituency, because we were told by the Special Board of Election Inspectors in Los Angeles that they those who will not write their names and sign in the return envelope, their ballots will automatically be invalidated, so they will not be counted. So that's another important thing. So in terms of the insufficient postage, so when we had this this slide, so that was the main issue in the San Francisco area. But today we checked with the Philippine consulate, so they have enough postage so that we can mail back the ballots. So with the delay in the mailing of the ballots, it is really a problem, because you know, we don't have control over USPS, whether we can, if you know, if we receive the ballots and then we mail it back, whether it gets back to the consulate in time. So that's really a concern, because it's already the voting has already started last week, and then they're gonna send out they want to finish sending out the ballots April 21st. So we only have like 2 more weeks to go. So you know, and the problem would occur, especially of those who have bad addresses. So that's an issue, and the disenfranchisement of a lot of kababayans in this election. So I think that's about it in terms of disenfranchisement. I would be willing to answer questions later. Thank you so much.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Zenia, sa pag-share ng mga particular issues and concerns dyan sa LA. It looks like madaming issues sa overall system and services provided to Filipinos overseas, that we are seeing the domino effect of that. Yung lack of consular services leading to community members not being able to be processed for dual citizenship, at yun ang reason kung bakit hindi sila nakakapag-register to vote. At thank you for sharing din na malaking problema yan, yung boxes and boxes, thousands of ballots ay hindi pa na-mail out at 1 week down na dito sa election period. So maraming salamat, Ms. Zenia. We'll go to San Francisco next with Era Chaudhary to share their experience.
Hi, good morning from San Francisco. I am Ara Chaudhary. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a member also of Dakila and Alab Assembly. And I had missed the voter registration because I was relying on information from the internet. I found out that the voters registration was extended, but when we arrived at the consulate to San Francisco, we found out na it was over in San Francisco. It had been extended only in New York. So when we went to the consulate nung Monday, I was accompanying members of NAFCON, members of Wansambayan. There were elders also who we'd met through rallies for the candidate that we were supporting. And then we found out na yun nga, a lot of people weren't receiving their ballot. So sinamahan namin sila ng partner ko because we're filmmakers and we were shooting what was going on. And they were asking for dialogue with the Philippine consulate. May letter din silang sinubmit. If you may, I will read it. So the open letter from San Francisco is to the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco and COMELEC Office for Overseas Voting. We, overseas Filipino voters under the jurisdiction of the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco, are registering our concerns regarding the delayed receipts of our ballots, as well as the lack of information on the voting process beyond social media posts and advisories on the San Francisco Consulate website. Overseas absentee voting began as of April 10, but many of us have yet to receive our ballots. Even today, the consulate is still in the process of mailing ballots when they should have been in our hands by the start of voting. The consulate in San Francisco oversees 8 states as well as Northern California and Northern Nevada, which covers 47,711 registered voters. Its duty is to ensure every single voter is given timely notice of the voting results, rules and regulations, and receives the necessary materials for the elections. However, across the San Francisco Consulate's jurisdiction, there was limited and even lack of outreach and services to fully inform voters of how to participate in the elections. We urge Consul General Neil Ferrer and the consulate in San Francisco to account for the delayed ballots and take action to guarantee our votes are received and accurately counted. We urge the consulate in San Francisco to, number 1, share the status of each ballot with individual voters, including when it was sent. Voters did not receive confirmation if their changes of address had been received, so the consulate must ensure all ballots are sent to the correct addresses. Number 2, investigate reports where individuals attempted to mail their ballots but were denied due to insufficient postage. Voters must be provided necessary postage to successfully mail their ballots, and the consulate should help address any instances where voters have not been provided the sufficient postage. Number 3, consider reopening the accreditation of media observers and civil society partners to increase democratic participation in the electoral process. And number 4, share information on the voting process for seafarers since ports span across the jurisdiction of the San Francisco Consulate. We are concerned by the delayed ballots and other inconsistencies that have already occurred during the opening week of OAV that could lead to the disenfranchisement of up to 47,711 voters. We'd like to note that due to lack of information and proactive outreach to previously registered voters, there was a significant drop in voter registration for this year's elections. We urge the San Francisco Consulate to ensure transparency in the voting process for overseas Filipino voters. We are alarmed by reports of pre-shaded ballots and false exit poll reports in overseas voting experiences in other countries. It is our civic duty to make sure there are clean and honest elections this year, and we expect the consulate to fulfill its responsibility as a representative of the Philippine government to ensure clean and honest elections as well. So when we submitted this letter, ang pinaharap sa amin ay property manager ng San Francisco. At least they introduced themselves as a property manager. It was alarming because parang if they can't take concerns like this seriously, na at most what they will present is you send an email to us and we'll consider responding. And it's alarming because how can you expect one agency to field 47,000 emails? That does not signal efficiency. It's ridiculous how unimportant this seems to them. And nakakabahala siya because especially for somebody who missed the deadline, parang nakakatakot isipin na, so anong mangyayari dun sa mga tao who do have the capacity to vote pero nare-repress yung right nila to vote, 'di ba? Parang where is it going to lean to? Is it parang may space for you already see you can already foresee that this is going to be space for dayaan. So parang it doesn't make sense that they would that the best that they can do is to tell us na just email your concerns. Tama yung sinabi. I want to echo what one of the speakers was saying kanina, na magpapa-email sila, walang help desk, wala man lang silang script for how they're going to field concerns such as this. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for the time.
Maraming salamat, Ara, for making the effort to seek dialogue with the consulate and sharing that letter. Ara is one of our kababayans here in the US who wanted to register but was not able to. And so with similar issues and concerns across the US on the process, we believe that Ara is one of many that were not able to register. So that's concerning and an issue that we want to keep raising. Ang susunod po nating mga speaker ay from Chicago. Two speakers from Chicago. Una po sa kanila ay si Mr. Ray Belen, Coordinator for Isang Bayan, Chicago.
Hi, magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. Maraming salamat, Nikki, for inviting me to be part of this press conference. What I'm going to share is based on personal experience and also community experience dito sa process ng election na ito, no? On the personal experience, I was so excited to be, to this upcoming election when I decided to apply for my dual citizenship way back, but I encountered so many issues even during the application time due to mga requirements na hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit kinakailangan, because when I had my what do you call this my documents used to be unapproved documents that being used to apply for passport and something like that, and even during my American citizenship, that's the my birth certificate is that's the one that I use. But this additional requirements required me to get that additional documents in the Philippines na required nila, and when it get back, it's just a matter of having it stamped by PSA, which is almost the same thing. Na may stamp lang, and then by the time that I got my dual citizenship, it was too late for me to have been registered as a voter for this upcoming election. So that's one. It's not only me; it's also my mom who applied at the same time. So on the community side, naman, what I'm going to share is there's so many red flags that going on right now. Sa mga nangyayari ngayon dito coming from the consulate. Recently, they announced sa posting nila, advisory posting nila, na there are 392 registered voters na walang address, which is hindi namin maintindihan kung bakit. Dahil sa pag-apply mo sa konsulado, the first thing that you did is when you fill up the form is you write your name and then you write your address. But this was they said that 392 person registered voter will possibly not going to receive their ballots because they're missing their addresses, and they post this on their website April 1st, which is Friday. And then the deadline is April 6th, which, going to weekend, you already lost 2 days. Then several days na lang to respond. So, and then when we check out the listing, they only publish the last name, but the initial lang ng kanilang first name. So we have been scrambling to to figure out sino ang mga taong ito. Maybe we can reach them out and alarm them or notify them that their name was part of the list. So yun yung isang mga problema, no. Ang pangalawang problema, we submitted several names to be part of the poll watchers. So far, we only have one that has been approved as a poll watcher. So we're still trying to work out in terms of how we, the others are going to be approved to become a poll watchers. And then recently, nag-post uli sila sa kanilang Facebook page, sa kanilang website na na-email na lang nila yung mga balota. And yet lumabas yun ng April 12 pero predated yung nakalagay na date kung kailan naka-mail. So several days already been missed, and according to our group chat, ngayon lang nare-receive ng mga botante dito yung kanilang mga balota. Going back to sa nabanggit kanina sa beginning ng program natin, na supposedly 75 days before the election, dapat umaayos na yung pagtanggap ng mga balota, if I receive it correctly, yung information na yon. So ngayon we're only several weeks na lang natitira at ngayon pa lang dumarating yung mga balota. So ano na nangyari dito sa lalo na dito sa Chicago, there are 22,000 registered voters. So kung ngayon pa lang nila i-mail yung 22,000, paano pa ma-receive yun ng mga taong dapat sana iboboto? So sa ngayon, ayun lang muna ang aking ma-share dito. At kung meron kayong question, you can direct the question to me and I will gladly try to answer it the best that I can. Salamat.
Salamat din, Mr. Ray Belen. We'll go to the next speaker from Chicago, Ms. Nerissa Alegrati, the spokesperson for Isang Bayan USA.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. So yeah, I've been here in the US as a health worker for 20 years na. And I would like to stress doon sa contribution ng ating mga kababayan sa healthcare, lalo na sa COVID na time, yung ating pagka-overseas Filipinos na at the same time ang puso nasa COVID situation doon sa Pilipinas, pero at the same time din, tayo ay nasa frontline dito sa US. And actually, karamihan ng mga nurses and health workers ay may mga ongoing pa na petitions, pickets at probable na mga strike across the US. But I would speak in behalf of Isang Bayan as the spokesperson, and last April 4, nag-start na tayong magkaroon ng press conference with overseas Filipino organizations, especially within the Migrante Network, regarding the situations across the world, especially Middle East, Asia, North America, and then Europe. So pangalawang press conference ko na ito, at nakikita ko dito sa mga findings ng ating mga spokesperson sa different consular mga kababayan natin na under sa different consular offices dito sa US, na halos the same ang mga irregularities. At actually, very mild ang term na irregularities. Klarong ang disenfranchisement na, inaccessibility, hindi sensitive sa ating sitwasyon dito at pangangailangan. And I would say yung fraud, to be straightforward na. parang nakikita ko nito sa experience namin sa Pilipinas, ito ay classic situation na for isang dagdag bawas or kaya kailangan natin ng mga kontradaya na pagkilos dito aside from additional push, no? So yun, mahirap hindi lang sa salita, kung hindi sa talagang actual physical situation. Example dito sa amin sa Midwest, ang consular office dito covers 12 states of the Midwest, no? Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Wisconsin. Mga over 22,000 voters. At nag-start pa lang mag-release ng or mag-mail ng mga baluta sometime last week, no? Towards the end of the week. I think Friday na, Thursday. So talagang nahihirapan ito habulan na parang imposible din natin na magawa, lalo na sa ating mga kababayan na ang access nila ay limited, no? So yun lang ang mai-add ko dito na let's be vigilant and assertive. Very good na yung mga nangyayari sa different consular offices. We dito sa Chicago, we need to do more. But the remaining, how many days na lang ba tayo? Aside from dapat sana 75 days before the start of voting, which is sabihin natin before April 10 sana, 75 days before April 10, at least nare-receive na natin ang ating mga baluta na start na tayo dito sa overseas. Pero mag 20 days na lang ay halos wala pang half of the overall na 197,000 voters dito, overseas voters dito sa US. And I think that's really logical ang problema na ito ngayon. Kasi I remember si Congressman Gaiti sa press conference namin April 4, ang sabi niya sa COMELEC daw, kasi nagpe-pressure din sila sa COMELEC sa Pilipinas, ang sabi daw ng COMELEC, talagang limited ang resources nila daw, at saka mga middle pa of April, matapos-tapos ang printing ng lahat ng mga baluta. At walang assurance doon na na-distinguish ba nila sino ang overseas voters para iyon ang unahin na i-imprenta at ipadala. So, iyan ang mga maraming challenges at problema na hinaharap natin. And I would like to end na lang na salamat sa mga nagdalo ngayon, lalo na yung media, mga leaders ng ating community, at saka yung mga speakers. And hindi tayo mawalan ng pag-asa. Patuloy tayo sa pag-push ng ating mga karapatan at mga get ready sa mga upcoming na pagkilos, while at the same time we do dialogue, but dialogue can also do what it can, but we need to be really out there in the consular offices and ang mga boses natin at mga more serious and militant actions na actually, kasi we need the world needs to know what the heck is going on in the Philippines right now. So maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat din po, Ms. Narisa Alegrati from Chicago. So we have heard from experiences in LA, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and New York. There are many direct letters to the consulate, open letters, petitions, and requests for direct dialogues with the consulate. We are seeing that many are seeking conversations, nananawagan at kumikilos ang mga Pilipino dito sa US para ma-address ang disenfranchisement issues and concerns ng mga Pilipino dito sa US. Ang susunod po nating speaker, our final speaker for today will be Tabitha Ponciano from the Malaya Movement USA. Tabitha?
Maraming salamat, Nikki, at maraming salamat sa iba't ibang speakers natin today. Despite nga ng issues ng mga overseas absentee voting na nakikita natin or narinig natin today, siguro more appropriately, instead of despite of, in light of these many issues, ang ating mga kababayan are even more galvanized to take action. Iniisip ko tong over the past few weeks, I've been hearing many different stories of disenfranchisement. At parang inisip ko talaga na parang tulad ni VP Lenny na despite the criticisms, the persistent red tagging from opposition, the constant downplaying of her track record and platform, she carries on the fight. Nakita natin yung press con this past Friday sa Manila Pen, parang, you know, added criticisms of her campaign and her efforts. Obstacles siya na inalalatag ng opposition. And so tayo din sa US, nararamdaman namin na we cannot be deterred by the obstacles in front of us, from the late ballots to the unclear communications from our consulates at iba pang issues na narinig natin. Para sa atin, clear naman ang concerns ng ating mga kababayan. Narinig natin siya again today from all across the US. At I think reflected ito sa nakita nating mga variety of activities over the past few months here in the US, from the rallies to the Walk for Democracy, yung mga pink caravans, protests sa harap ng consulates, at even yung mga picnics or meriendas for Lenny and Kiko. Pero konting oras na lang until sa pivotal elections na ito. I think we're at a critical juncture in our history. Two dictators or two children of dictators are poised to take Malacanang again. Pero here in the US, we won't be deterred. We won't be scared. The obstacles in front of us are small compared to desire natin to come together. So iniimbita po namin kayo this Saturday, April 23rd, for the US-wide Rally for Hope and Democracy, kung saan ang message of unity ay nasa forefront. 12 organizations, many individuals, many sectors across the country, and other civil society groups are coming together to host our different activities on a day where we will be the loudest together to call for hope and democracy. From coast to coast, from Hawaii to Washington, D.C., the Midwest, and everywhere in between. Merong planned events. Punta po kayo sa malayamovement.com/hope-democracy para makita yung iba't ibang events. Each event is organized by different groups collaborating on the ground, talagang showing the message that VP Lenny and Kiko are running with in the Philippines, which is we have to come together on the ground with our kababayan, with the explicit desire to show their support for VP Lenny on her birthday, but really to come together for hope and democracy in the US. Itong effort na to, again, could not have been possible without the desire for our kababayan to come together, and we want to show unity, we want to show strength despite of or in spite of obstacles. At ipakita natin ng overseas voters that we are paying attention and we are ready to take action together for hope and democracy. So again, you are all invited April 23rd. If there's an action near you, attend it. If there's not one, plan it, and let's rally for hope and democracy across the US this Saturday. Thank you. Kita-kits.
Kita-kits. Salamat, Ms. Tabitha Ponciano. That's it for our speakers today. We will proceed to the Q&A portion. I think just a few notes from what we've heard today. It's very clear that this election is one of the most critical in our lifetime in history. Election po ito, hindi ito hide and seek. So para sa COMELEC, wag niyo pong paglaruan ng mga panawagan ng mga Pilipino para sa isang matapat at malinis na halalan para sa bagong administrasyon. In light of this, in light of the concerns and issues that were presented, different community organizations are coming together to support Contra Daya and the efforts to monitor fraud during this election period. So if you or anyone you know are experiencing irregularities or direct disenfranchisement during this election period, please visit the link bit.ly/Contra-Daya-USA to file a confidential report. Your voice and experience will help us ensure a clean and honest election this period. So now we'll move on to the open floor for question and answers. For the process, if you have a question, please write it in the chat. For press, we'll also ask if you want to ask your question out loud. So we'll be opening up the floor to you. So we'll give it a couple minutes for folks to enter in their question. For logistical questions, could media be given the Zoom recording link after? Yes, we will also release a statement today to all media in attendance. Our speakers can be made available for additional comments. And if you need to follow up, liaisons can contact our organizers today for when articles are published. We'll get started with our first question from Don Tagala, ABS-CBN. Don, would you like to ask your question out loud?
Oh, sige. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, cool. So, now for sure the ballots will be delivered late, and we spoke to the COMELEC, and they're not budging. It's set in stone that the absolute deadline would be May 9, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what should we be doing? What should kababayans be doing now that that's the case?
Thank you, Don Tagala from ABS-CBN News. For our speakers today, maybe we could go to Mr. Eric Lachica, who made efforts to have conversations with the ambassador.
Thank you. Yes, I think it will require, a concerted effort by all concerned groups to engage the consul generals, the consular officials on this on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, to find out the progress of the mailing of the ballots, to monitor the return of the filled out ballots and the bad, mailings. That would, we also, like I mentioned in the letter, we have to clarify the role of the community observers, because if the, for example, the embassy here, the consulate here in Washington insists that the deadline has passed on April 9, how can the community monitor the election proceedings at the different posts? So I think that should be we should get guidance, clarity from the consul generals on that issue, hoping that COMELEC will revise their guidelines, because they can always claim, oh, the COMELEC has not changed their deadline, so we can't accept you guys to monitor the Monday and Thursday counting. That will be a major setback for all concerned. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Lachica, from U.S. Filipinos for Good Governance. Ms. Zenia Tupas, will you provide an answer as a poll watcher in LA?
Yeah. So the concern is that so not everyone has received. So in terms of mailing, it's only half of the 35,000 voters. So it is really a big concern. So it would have been best if they could extend the voting period, So I think we should be discussing that with Eric, to come up with some kind of a petition to COMELEC in the Philippines to extend the voting period because of the delay in the mailing of the ballots. It is really interesting and unfortunate that the LA Consulate General's office doesn't have a specific daily target in terms of how many ballots they would have to mail. I looked at their whiteboard this morning, and I found out like on April 8th they only mailed 1,000 ballots. April 11 they mailed 1,250. It was only like last week that they mailed like something like 6,000 ballots. But everybody has been expecting their ballots in the mail. So I've been really anticipating my ballots and asking friends if they've received theirs. So I only heard of a few people who have received their ballots. So I think as much as we try to convince our kababayans in our area to return their ballots as soon as they get them, like mail back their ballots or personally drop off their ballots at the consulate. So that's really part of our campaign. On the overall, I think we should be discussing with Eric and the rest of the group here that we should, ask the COMELEC for an extension because of the delay in the receipt of the ballots of the voters. Otherwise, we'll be disenfranchised. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zenia. Earlier today, Ms. Narisa Allegretti also talked about actions moving forward. So Ms. Narisa from Isang Bayan, the question is, what can still be done to make sure all votes will be counted?
Yeah, of course, we want to show that we are doing our best. Like, for example, once we receive the ballot and there's still enough time, we can do how do you call that? Yung express mail. We cannot just be relying on the 2 stamps or even adding 1 stamp on that. So we'll try to do that. And then here's Chicago. I noticed that the last advisory is pwedeng a drop off. So that can be one. But we have 12 states here in the Midwest. So that can be another thing that can be done at the most. But aside from that, I think it's really ang panawagan talaga natin would be reconsideration or a push for the COMELEC to extend our dahil hindi naman natin kasalanan Sila naman ang nag-create ng kondisyon kung bakit mahirapan ang mga kababayan natin, ang ating mga botante dito sa US sa Philippine election na to dahil naman sa kanilang kakulangan, no? Sabihin man ng mga konsulado or ng embassy na it's because of COMELEC, still kung titingnan yan, this is the accountability of the Duterte government. What's behind this? Dapat ganun pa din ang tingnan natin. So let's see, push the COMELEC, ang panawagan natin na i-extend ito. But of course, by the time maski i-push ito, ma-extend, we will see already the pattern of what's going on sa election. And kailangan ready tayo lahat for a more specific militant action. Hindi natin pabayaan na hanggang dyan lang tayo. No? Dapat singilin natin sila sa sitwasyon na to. Hindi tayo nagkulang sa ating dapat magawa. Maski citizen man ng US at hindi naka-dual citizen dahil sa kahirapan din ng extension or mga requirement, naroon pa din tayo ang ating puso at isip sa Pilipinas. Every week, nagpapadala tayo ng mga sustento or tulong sa ating mga kababayan. We have contributed a lot. So we should make Duterte accountable. And again, yung sinabi ni Tabitha ng Malaya, we do not want itong dalawang anak ng dalawang diktador ang manalo. So, lalo na sa isang bayan, clear cut tayo na Lenny Kiko. So that's the thing that I could say. Kind of emotional, but hindi mo pwedeng pakalma-kalma lang tayo dito ngayon. Yun lang. Salamat.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Narisa Aligrati from Chicago and Isang Bayan, USA. We'll move on to the next question from Ruthie. For the panelists, open for all. When pressed for an explanation about the delays, Consulate and COMELEC Commissioner avoided giving concrete date that the COMELEC sent the electoral materials to the US. They learned later on through other means that it was sent on March 23rd, about 17 days before the first day of overseas absentee voting. Multiple people raised consideration for extension of the deadline out of fear that votes will not arrive back on time. However, the commissioner was firm that no extension will be done because the USPS is reliable and they don't see major delays since it's a domestic. So panelists, what can you say about this? Is there a basis for a call for extension?
Could I go?
Yeah,
Yes,
go
we'll
ahead.
go Miss Carolina and then Tabitha.
Yeah, I was taken aback when we had the town hall meeting on April 11 with the commissioner of election from the Philippines. I was taken aback because this very same question was asked that night, and I was taken aback that they're not going to extend. And I feel like maybe, at the time, because, so many events, so many rallies that we are preparing, right, to make sure that the ballots will be received in a timely manner. And then we have that town hall meeting, and that's what he said. And I feel for me, that's not acceptable because like what Nerissa said, it's not our fault that it was delayed. For crying out loud, they knew 6 years ago that there will be election. We know that the presidential term is 6 years, and therefore they know that after 6 years there will be election, and they are well paid off public officials in the commission, right, and the election, and they should have been prepared halfway through of Duterte's presidency. They should have been preparing for that. So that's number one. And as far as like the concern about whether the balota will be received in a timely manner, I am really questioning about that because number one, I know a lot of people in New York, and only one person that I personally know have received her ballot. And so it's crucial that we actually work together on a local and national level to really push for the extension. Why? Because we all know majority of our kababayans are working in domestic work, service industry, and elderly companions. Majority of our folks are migrants, right? And majority of our kababayans are working live-in. So can you imagine if they are living in for 1 week, for 2 weeks, by the time they get to their apartment, to their home, it's like 2 weeks pass by, and that's when they going to receive their ballots. And then with the issue of like stamp, that there is there's a 20-cent discrepancy in the stamp, so people have to walk to the post office to make sure that their ballot there's an adequate stamp. Now, having said that, talk really seriously about what's our next step, as like really pushing for the extension, because this is not our fault. And to me, really clearly, what it's pointing here is that this is a form of, they are going to deliberately, they gonna disfranchise the voters, in particular, the absentee voters. To me, that's very clear. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carolina. We'll go to Tabitha Ponciano.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maganda nga yung point ni Ate Carolina. 6 years they've known about this for 6 years, and clearly hindi sila prepared, or it wasn't a priority for COMELEC and our consulates. So, I think at this point, we can't rely now on the COMELEC to take action or to speed the process up for us. We have to make sure na, they've said it. They've said it to us. They've said it to people who met with them. It's no longer in their hands. Even though for some of them, the ballots are still literally in the hands of the consulates here. Pero we have to really look beyond what the COMELEC can do, or what we can ask the COMELEC to do at this point. I think we have to really emphasize the need to collectively take action. We have to do what we can that's in our power to make sure that for those who have their ballots, that their ballots are counted. And I think, for us in Malaya, USA, ang emphasis naman namin is to get organized beyond the elections, to really be able to hold our government accountable, the Duterte government accountable, or whatever administration comes after him. And so again, I think for us, it's really an understanding that we are now, the ball's in our court in some ways, right? And we have to show our collective effort to get our votes in the hands of the people that will count them, or in the machines that will count them. And so one thing we can do, and really something to creatively think about in the next 2 weeks, in the 3 weeks leading up to the elections, is how do we take and deliver our votes together to the consulates if you have them, making sure that when you have your ballot in hand, delivering it directly to the doors of the consulates, so that the issue of mailing or stamps, it's outside of the question. And I know that's not possible for everyone here across the country, kasi wala namang consulates all over the country where all of our kababayans are at. But example lang naman dito sa Portland is we are trying to organize a ballot day, collection day, where our kababayans will come together and vote and mail our ballots together, so that we know that our votes are heading in the same direction, and can track it that way. But again, we have to take it into our own hands, and not rely on a government that has shown its corruption, its inefficiency over and over for the past few years, especially during this pandemic. So yun lang, I think we have to call for the investigation of the COMELEC for these discrepancies, the inadequacies at ensure na they are held accountable for this poor handling of this very critical elections. Yeah, that's it for me.
Salamat, Tabitha. We'll move on to answers from Mr. Eric Lachica and Ray Belen, and then we'll continue on to the next question.
Yes, I think Don Tagala of ABS CBN had raised a question, what are the next steps? And for us in USFGG, we work closely with our volunteers in different cities to do a GOTV, get out the voters. It's the best way to engage them on the list. The names are there. When they registered, it's on the websites of the consulates. And we worked since last December with our allies, the Sambayan and Malaya movement, especially in the East Coast, to come up with a division of labor so we can go through the lists. And I would recommend that the different chapters or different groups in different cities form a get out the vote team to focus on the voters list, send them messaging on Facebook, identifying the contact information on Facebook, on Google, search, phone. You can track them down. We've done it over the past few months, tracking down voters. We get an about 30% average success rate in locating the voter, be it in Connecticut or in Florida or in Irvine, California, or in Portland, Oregon. That can be done by using the wonders of social media. So I would recommend that in the next 3 weeks, getting a message to them that your ballots are supposed to arrive next week. If you don't receive it, contact the consulate. That's the email that they provide, their website. If you need help, with the filling out the ballot, you'll be surprised. Some folks don't know the senatorial candidates and also the party list. That's another advantage. I had my high school classmates call me up. Oh, sino iboboto natin dyan sa Senate? Ganon, in the previous election. So you have to explain. And the good thing about developing a one-on-one relationship, organizing-wise, with the voter, is that it will pay dividends in the future. We have to be strategic about this. This is only the first big battle, major battle, of course. We have 2025 coming up, assuming a worst case scenario. So all of these developing individual, friendships with these voters will be crucial to the success of our organizing efforts. I just want to leave you with that. And if you're interested, we have training sessions Tuesday, Thursday, Thursday for our California folks, and also on a Sunday evening training sessions for Get Out the Voters. And I'll post that on our website or on the chat page.
Thank you, Mr. Lachica. We'll go to Mr. Ray Belen.
Hi, salamat pagbibigay mo ng pagkakataon makapagsalita dito sa issue na ito. So I think malinaw na kung paano na unmask ang Duterte administration dito sa pagbanggal nitong election ito, no. Kung titingnan mo yung mga COMELEC appointees, kung sino ang mga kung sino ang inappoint ni Duterte, sino yung mga contract na pinrovide nila kung paano ang pagprinta ng mga ballots. Bakit gano'n nangyari? May mga budget sila galing sa tax ng mga ng taong bayan, sa pondo ng taong bayan. Dapat silang managot dito sa nangyayaring ito, no. Sa kasalukuyan, mahirap na talagang ma-catch up yung yung kung paano makakaboto lahat na dapat makaboto dito sa eleksyon ito. Dahil kung tutuusin, mathematically, kung kagaano lang karami ang i-mail nilang balot every day, there's no way na ma-email nila lahat yung marami diyan ang hindi makaka-receive ng balota. So yun yung ating dapat bantayan. Pagkatapos ng eleksyon, singilin natin ang mga taong dapat singilin. Yung mga dapat panagutin, kagaya ng mga membro ng COMELEC kung bakit nagkaganoon ang ganitong proseso ng botohan ay dapat managot. At kung dapat silang tanggalin sa trabaho, di dapat silang tanggalin sa trabaho. Ayun lang. Salamat.
Thank you, Mr. Ray Belen. We'll go to the last question for today from Michelle from Rappler. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, hi, good morning. This is Michelle from Rappler. I actually have two questions, if that's okay. The first one, I just wanted to ask if each community representative from the different areas, actually Ms. Tupas and Ms. De Leon actually answered for their areas. What is your personal or organization's knowledge of voters who have received their ballots in the mail? So if the COMELEC and the consulates don't release this data, then this can at least give us like a glimpse of how many voters have received their ballots at this point. Because if community leaders don't know many voters who have received their ballots at this point, then that should speak volumes. So it's really just anecdotal knowledge, since we don't really have this data. It's not really transparent from the COMELEC and the consulate. So perhaps personal or organizational knowledge of how many you know have received their ballots. Thank you.
Okay, so I will answer on behalf of like here in the LA area. So far, after meeting with some of the poll watchers, only 2 of the poll watchers of the 17 poll watchers we have received their ballots. And me, myself, I live like around 3 miles from the consulate. I haven't received mine. And so are my friends, because I get in touch with my friends, just to check if they have ballots. So far, that's to my knowledge. As far as I know, only 2 of our 17 poll watchers have received.
And Ms. Zenia, how many ballots have not been sent out from your knowledge?
I think it's half. So I made a total, because I checked on the. So far, of the 34,914 registered voters, they mailed out last week around 16,000. 16,000. Hold on. 16,000. A little, almost 17,000 registered ballot packets.
Thank you.
To be exact, 16,461. I made a total from the whiteboard that they have in the consulate.
Thank you. Could we hear from San Francisco, Chicago, then New York, if you have the number?
Unfortunately, I don't have the number.
Okay. Chicago and New York?
I don't have the number also. We will try to get it sometime soon.
Unfortunately, I don't have the number yet, but also I'm in different group chat here in New York, and I have been like asking if anyone in those group chat that I'm part of, if they received their ballot yet, and no one has responded yet. So really, it's showing that even in New York alone, I don't think even 1/4 of the population in New York have received their balota yet. I doubt it, because yeah, like I said, it's only my aunt that I know I can specifically say that receive a ballot, and everyone is not. And actually, some people are calling me when I'm gonna get my ballot. That's like, we don't know. Yeah. So this is deliberate.
I'm sorry, I
Okay.
make a correction. So it's only 3 of the 17 poll watchers, not 2. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Zinya. From Isang Bayan, Ms. Nerissa, do you have numbers or percentage of ballots mailed out from the different consulates?
We didn't have the exact number, but there's a pattern na kumbaga ba pwede nating sabihin mabibilang sa kamay ng bawat volunteers natin or even itong mga speakers natin dito, no? Sa represented naman ng different consular offices. So, for my exact experience here sa Chicago, mga around Thursday or Friday, meron nang nag-register. Less than 5 people lang din that I know. But our group chat naman I have several group chat, pero out of that, mga 5 lang nakita ko na nakatanggap na ng kanilang balota. And then Saturday, there was a big event here that gathers the Filipino student associations with their parents and grandparents and relatives. There's over 2,000 lining up in the University of Illinois, Chicago for the Battle of the Bamboo, which is a huge event every year. And nag-flyer kami. Siguro mga 1,000 yung collectively yung kami na nagpa-flyer. Wala pang naka-receive sa kanilang balota. I'm emphasizing that point because that's like out of like 2,000 plus na nag-attend. We have like 1,000 na nag-line up, na nag-flyer kami. Actually, I was flyering sa Isang Bayan activities and including the National Alliance of Filipino Concern na statement. And then walang naka-receive pa ng kanilang balota, and that's across the Midwest na kuan. There was even some who are from Nevada because yung children nila ay part sa mga performers ng Battle of the Bamboo. So I would safely say that gives you a picture of what's going on, right? And that's just 2 days ago, Saturday. So yun lang.
Thank you, Ms. Nerissa. We'll open it up to the other panelists to share.
Yeah.
Tabitha?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm here based in Oregon. Jurisdiction namin is the San Francisco Consulate's jurisdiction. We've been hearing reports na about 90% of ballots were mailed from the San Francisco Consulate on April 15th, meaning 4 days after simula ng OAV. And anecdotally, we've been conducting phone banking to talk to our registered voters here in the area. And about 1 in 4 people in Oregon have not received their ballots. So actually flip, 3 out of 4 people have not received their ballots in the area. So medyo clear naman yung even through these anecdotes, it is worrying. Tapos, as Ate Nerissa mentioned, mabibilang sa kamay natin ang nakatanggap ng balota. Again, for us, it's among the 30 or so people we phone banked, many of them have not received their ballots. Based sa mga reports na narinig namin, like all over the US, wala pa sa 50% ng mga balota sa konsuladong kanilang na-email at this point. And this is a very optimistic estimate. With 20 days left in the elections, this is why we're saying this is a cause for alarm. We had a call last week among different concerned organizations and individuals where we were hearing already the reports of disenfranchisement. And so parang continued naman yung inadequacies and failed efforts ng COMELEC at din naman ng consulates dito sa US to ensure na, those who are able to vote are actually receiving the ballots in their cities and in their areas. Yun lang.
Thank you, Tabitha. Michelle, do you want to ask your second question?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. I want to address this to anyone on the panel who has been familiar with elections from before. So I think it would be really nice to put this into perspective and into context some more. So can we have like an idea of perhaps the smoothest case of elections from before? Like, are these problems unprecedented, or were there disenfranchisement fears from before?
Thank you, Michelle. We'll start with Eric Lachica.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, having been a poll watcher since 2010 elections, 2013, 2016, 2019, there were always problems with the mailing of the ballots. We've complained about that because the first time around, the ballots were mailed directly from Manila to the U.S. postal address, and a lot of that's very expensive, for one thing. And number two is the wrong addresses, because the people who do the data entry, for example, me, I couldn't find my ballot. It was sent to Washington, D.C. as opposed to putting the Maryland state. So binalik ng U.S. Post Office embassy. That was one time. Then the other time was that my wife received hers, but I didn't receive mine. I complained. They found it at the embassy. It was apparently not sent to the right address, so they had to remail it back to me. One time was that if you recall, in 2019, I believe there was a problem of delayed, payment of the postal expenses. We officially complained to COMELEC. Why is that? The ambassadors complaining that they don't have $120,000 to pay for the balance of the mailings in 2019, if I recall. So that was resolved last minute, but we got our ballots because of the postage stamp delay. We got it, I think, 1 week before the elections. So that's to put it in perspective. As been said earlier, the COMELEC should have learned from the lessons past. One thing that boggles my mind is one thing that they learned from the previous 3 elections. Why can't they use postage meters? Hindi ba? Why do they have to put 2 or 3 first-class stamps on the mailing ballot, then they put 2 stamps on the prepaid envelope? Just imagine the man hours. A postage machine, that's the wonders of modern mailing, is that they have it. Any small business can do that. So, and I was informed by the consul in LA 2 weeks, a week before the elections, that they were budgeting $7 per mailing, including the prepaid return envelope. So multiply that by what, 100, almost 200,000, mailings. Oh man, that's a lot of money being spent just for the North Americas.
Thank you, Eric. Nerissa?
Yeah, so in 2016, I was very active in the electoral process because I was with the Migrante Party List. And then for the presidential ball, we supported Grace Pool, no? For that year in 2016, Makabayan Black supported Grace Pool, and then Migrante Party List is aligned with the Makabayan Black. At that time, it was already inefficient. Meron na kaming na-observe na mga kahirapan din. But I would say itong sitwasyon natin ngayon, unimaginable. At least at that time, mga March pa lang, nare-receive na yung mga balota, no? Pero, and then may choices pa na pwedeng magpunta para ibigay mismo yung balota at matanggap mo yung resibo, no? Pagka bigay mo ng balota. Pero ngayon, 20 days na lang, halos more than half. I would say mga siguro 2/3 or what, no? Kung sabihin lang natin na ang LA already have like half of that. Pero may remaining pang 17,000. If we are even very concerned of the 392 no mailing address ng Chicago, how much for the thousands? So, talagang hindi natin, ang hirap i-imagine kung bakit ganito ka incompetent, inefficient ang sitwasyon. So, pinaka-worst ito. Mahirap maghanap ng words to describe how worst this performance ngayon ng COMELEC. That's the only thing I could say with this.
Thank you, Ms. Narisa Allegretti from Chicago. That's all the time that we have for today. If you have follow-up questions, you can send them to contradayausa@gmail.com. So maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat for joining today. Hopefully we have painted the complete picture through experiences in different states. It's clear that there's negligence on the COMELEC's end, and overseas Filipinos are not being silent, are not sitting idle, and are organizing themselves to deliver their votes and making it count. So a few reminders for organizers and speakers for today. Please stay on for a photo. For the rest of the group, thank you for coming today. We'll release a press statement to everyone in attendance. Our speakers can be requested and made available for additional comments. Please follow up with your liaison contacts if and when articles are published. Again, if you or anyone you know are experiencing irregularities during this voting period, please visit bit.ly/contradayausa to file a confidential report. We hope to see everyone participating on April 23rd for the US-wide rallies for hope and democracy. Maraming salamat, everyone. For speakers and organizers, there's been a request from ABS-CBN for a group photo.